Morning, friends. We are coming near the end of Pilgrim's Progress, Christiana's journey. Now Mr. Feeblemind, when they were going out of the door, made as if he intended to linger, the which when Mr. Greatheart espied, he said, "Come, Mr. Feeblemind, pray do you go along with us. I will be your conductor, and you shall fare as the rest." "Alas, I want a suitable companion. You are all lusty and strong, but I, as you see, am weak. I choose therefore rather to come behind, lest by reasons of my own infirmities I should be both a burden to myself and to you. I am, as I said, a man of a weak and a feeble mind, and shall be offended and made weak at that which others can bear. I shall like no laughing, I shall like no gay attire, I shall like no unprofitable questions. Nay, I am so weak a man, as if to be offended with that which others have a liberty to do. I do not know all the truth. I am a very ignorant Christian man. Sometimes, if I hear some rejoice in the Lord, it troubles me, because I cannot do so too. It is with me as it is with a weak man among the strong, or as with a sick man among the healthy, or as a lamp despised. He that is ready to slip with his feet is as a lamp despised in the thought of him that is at ease, so that I know not what to do." "But, brother," said Mr. Greatheart, "I have it in commission to comfort the feeble-minded and to support the weak. You must needs go along with us. We will wait for you. We will lend you our help. We will deny ourselves of some things both opinionative and practical, for your sake. We will not enter into doubtful disputations before you. We will be made all things to you, rather than you shall be left behind." Now, all this while they were at Gaius's door, and behold, as they were thus in the heat of their discourse, Mr. Ready to Halt came by with his crutches in his hand, and he also was going on pilgrimage. Then said Mr. Feeble-minded to him, "Man, how camest thou hither?" "I was but just now complaining that I had not a suitable companion, but thou art according to my wish. Welcome, welcome, good Mr. Ready to Halt. I hope thee and I may be some help." "I shall be of thy company," said Mr. Ready to Halt, "and good Mr. Feeble-mind, rather than we will part since we are thus happily met. I will lend thee one of my crutches." "Nay," said he, "though I thank thee for thy good will, I am not inclined to halt, for I am lame. Howbeit I think when occasion is, it may help me against a dog. If either myself or my crutches can do thee a pleasure, we are both at thy command, good Mr. Feeble-mind." Thus therefore they went on. Mr. Greatheart and Mr. Honest went before, Christiana and her children went next, and Mr. Feeble-mind and Mr. Ready to Halt came behind with his crutches. Then said Mr. Honest, "Pray, sir, now we are upon the road, tell us some profitable things of some that have gone on pilgrimage before us." With a good will," said Mr. Greatheart. "I suppose you have heard how Christian of old did meet with Apollyon in the valley of humiliation, and also what hard work he had to go through, the valley of the shadow of death. Also I think you cannot but have heard how Faithful was put to it with Madam Wanton, with Adam the First, with one discontent and shame, for as deceitful villains as a man can meet with upon the road." "Yes, I have heard all these," said Mr. Honest, "but indeed good Faithful was hardest put to it with shame. He was an unwearied one." "Ay, as for the Pilgrim, well said, he of all men had the wrong name. But pray, sir, where was it that Christian and Faithful met Talkative? That same was also a notable one." "He was a confident fool, yet many follow his ways," said Mr. Greatheart. "He had like to have beguiled Faithful," said Honest. "Ay, but Christian put him into a way quickly to find him out." Thus they went on till they came at the place where Evangelist met with Christian and Faithful, and prophesied to them what should befall them at Vanity Fair. Then said their guide, "Hereabouts did Christian and Faithful meet with Evangelist, who prophesied to them of what troubles they should meet with at Vanity Fair." "Say you so? I dare say it was a hard chapter that then he did read unto them." "'Twas so, but he gave them encouragement withal. But what do we talk of them? They were a couple of lion-like men. They had set their faces like flints. Don't you remember how undaunted they were when they stood before the judge? Well, Faithful bravely suffered." "So he did, and as brave things come and as brave things came out for Hopeful and some others, as the story relates it, were converted by his death. Well, but pray go on, for you are well acquainted with things. Above all that Christian met with after he had passed through Vanity Fair, one By-ends was the arch one. By-ends, what was he? A very arch fellow, a downright hypocrite, one that would be religious which way ever the world went, but so cunning that he would be sure neither to lose nor suffer for it. He had his mode of religion for every fresh occasion, and his wife was as good at it as he. He would turn and change from opinion to opinion, yea, and plead for so doing too. But so far as I could learn, he came to an ill end with his By-ends. Nor did I ever hear that any of his children were ever of any esteem with any that truly feared God. Now by this time they were come within sight of the town of Vanity, where Vanity Fair is kept. So when they saw that they were so near the town, they consulted with one another how they should pass through the town, and some said one thing and some another. At last Mr. Greatheart said, I have, as you may understand, often been a conductor of pilgrims through this town. Now I am acquainted with one Mr. Nason of Cyprusian by nation, an old disciple, at whose house we may lodge. If you think good, said he, we will turn in there. Content, said old Honest. Content, said Christiana. Content, said Mr. Feeble-mind. And so they said all. Now you must think it was eventide by that. They got to the outside of the town, but Mr. Greatheart knew the way to the old man's house. So thither they came, and he called at the door, and the old man within knew his tongue so soon as ever he heard it. So he opened, and they all came in. Then said Nason, their host, how far have ye come today? So they said, from the house of Gaius, your friend. I promise you, said he, you have gone a good stitch. You may well be a weary. Sit down. So they sat down. Then said their guide, come, what cheer, sirs? I dare say you are welcome to my friend. I also, said Mr. Nason, do bid you welcome, and whatever you want, do but say, and we will do what we can to get it for you. Our great want a while since was harbour and good company, and now I hope we have both, said Mr. Honest. For harbour you see what it is, but for good company that will appear in the trial. Well, said Mr. Greatheart, will you have the pilgrims up into their lodging? I will, said Mr. Nason. So he had them to their respective places, and also shewed them a very fair dining room where they might be, and sup together until time was come to go to rest. Now when they were set in their places, and were a little cheery after their journey, Mr. Honest asked his landlord if there were any store of good people in the town. We have a few, for indeed they are but a few when compared with them on the other side. But how shall we do to see some of them? For the sight of good men to them that are going on pilgrimage is like to the appearing of the moon and stars to them that are sailing upon the seas, said Honest. Then Mr. Nason stamped with his foot, and his daughter Grace came up. So he said unto her, Grace, go you, tell my friends, Mr. Contrite, Mr. Holyman, Mr. Love-saint, and Mr. Dare-not-lie, and Mr. Penitent, that I have a friend or two at my house that have a mind this evening to see them. So Grace went to call them, and they came, and after salutation made, they sat down together at the table. Then said Mr. Nason, their landlord, my neighbours, I have, as you see, a company of strangers come to my house. They are pilgrims. They come from afar, and are going to Mount Sion. But who, quoth he, do you think this is? Pointing with his finger at Christiana. It is Christiana, the wife of Christian, that famous pilgrim, who with Faithful his brother were so shamefully handled in our town. At that they stood amazed, saying, we little thought to see Christiana when Grace came to call us, wherefore this is a very comfortable surprise. When they asked her of her welfare, and if these young men were her husband's sons, and when she had told them they were, they said, the king whom you love and serve, make you as your father, and bring you where he is in peace. Then Mr. Honest, when they were all sat down, asked Mr. Contrite and the rest in what posture their town was at present. You may be sure we are full of hurry in fair time, said Contrite. 'Tis hard keeping our hearts and spirits in any good order when we are in a cumbered condition. He that lives in such a place as this is, and that has to do with such as we have, has need of an item to caution him to take heed every moment of the day. But how are your neighbors now for quietness? Said Honest. Contrite answered, They are much more moderate now than formerly. You know how Christian and faithful were used at our town, but of late, I say, they have been far more moderate. I think the blood of faithful lieth with load upon them, till now, for since they burned him, they have been ashamed to burn any more. In those days we were afraid to walk the streets, but now we can shew our heads. Then the name of a professor was odious, now specially in some parts of our town. For you know our town is large, religion is counted honourable. Then said Mr. Contrite to them, Pray, how fareth it with you in your pilgrimage? How stands the country affected towards you? Honest answered, It happens to us as it happeneth to wayfaring men. Sometimes our way is clean, sometimes foul, sometimes uphill, sometimes down. We are seldom at a certainty. The wind is not always on our backs, nor is every one a friend that we meet with that we meet with in the way. We have met with some notable rubs already, but what are yet behind we know not. But for the most part we find it true that has been talked of old. A good man must suffer trouble. You talk of rubs. What rubs have you met with all? What rubs have you met with all? Said Contrite. Nay, ask Mr. Greatheart, our guide, for he can give the best account of that. We have been beset with 3 or 4 times already, said Mr. Greatheart. First Christiana and her children were beset with 2 ruffians that they feared would take away their lives. They were beset with Giant Bloody Man, Giant Maul, and Giant Slaygood. Indeed, we did rather beset the last, when we're beset of him, and thus it was, after we had been some time at the house of Gaius, mine host, and of the whole church, we reminded upon a time to take our weapons with us, and so go see if we could light upon any of those that were enemies to pilgrims. For we heard that there was a notable one thereabouts. Now Gaius knew his haunt better than I, because he dwelt thereabout, so we looked and looked, till at last we discerned the mouth of his cave. Then were we glad, and plucked up our spirits. So we approached up to his den, and lo, when we came there, he had dragged by mere force into his net this poor man, Mr. Feeble-mind, and was about to bring him to his end. But when he saw, supposing, as we thought, he had another prey, he left the poor man in his hole, and came out. So we fell to it full sore, and he lustily laid about him. But in conclusion he brought down to the ground, and his head cut off, and set up by the wayside for a terror to such as should after practice such ungodliness. That I tell you the truth, here is the man himself to affirm it, who was as a lamb taken out of the mouth of the lion. Then said Mr. Feeble-mind, I found this true to my cost and comfort, to my cost when he threatened to pick my bones every moment, and to my comfort when I saw Mr. Greatheart and his friends with their weapons approach so near for my deliverance. Then said Mr. Holyman, there are 2 things that they have need to be possessed with that go on pilgrimage, courage and an unspotted life. If they have not courage, they can never hold on their way, and if their lives be loose, they will make the very name of the pilgrim stink. Then said Mr. Lovesaint, I hope this caution is not needful amongst you, but truly there are many that go upon the road that rather declare themselves strangers to pilgrimage than strangers and pilgrims in the earth. Then said Mr. Dare not lie. It is true, they neither have the pilgrim's weed nor the pilgrim's courage. They go not uprightly, but will awry with their feet. One shoe goeth inward, another outward, and their hosen out behind. Here a rag and there a rent, to the disparagement of their Lord. These things, said Mr. Penitent, they ought to be troubled for, nor are the pilgrims like to have that grace upon them, and their pilgrim's progress as they desire, until the way is cleared for such spots and blemishes. Thus they sat talking and spending the time, until supper was set upon the table, into which they went and refreshed their weary bodies, so they went to rest. Now they stayed in the fair a great while, at the house of Mr. Nason, who in process of time gave his daughter Grace unto Samuel, Christian's son, to wife, and his daughter Martha to Joseph. The time, as I said, that they lay there was long, for it was not now as in former times, wherefore the pilgrims grew acquainted with many of the good people of the town, and did them what service they could. Mercy, as she was wont, laboured much for the poor, wherefore their bellies and backs blessed her. And she was there an ornament to her profession. And to say the truth, for Grace, Phoebe, and Martha, they were all of a very good nature, and did much good in their places. They were also all of them very fruitful, so that Christian's name was, as said before, was like to live in the world. While they lay here, there came a monster out of the woods, and slew many of the people of the town. It would also carry away their children, and teach them to suck its whelps. That is creepy. Now no man in the town durst so much as face this monster, but all men fled when they heard of the noise of his coming. The monster was like unto no one beast upon the earth. Its body was like a dragon, and it had several heads and 10 horns. It made great havoc of children, and yet it was governed by a woman. This monster propounded conditions to men, and such men as loved their lives more than their souls accepted those conditions, so they came under. Now this Mr. Greatheart, together with these that came to visit sorry, friends. Now this Mr. Greatheart, together with those that came to visit the pilgrims at Mr. Nason's house, entered into a covenant to go and engage this beast, if perhaps they might deliver the people of this town from the paw and mouths of this so devouring a serpent. Then did Mr. Greatheart, Mr. Contrite, Mr. Holyman, Mr. Dare Not Lie, and Mr. Penitent, with their weapons, go forth to meet him. Now the monster at first was very rampant, and looked upon these enemies with great disdain, but they so belaboured him, being sturdy men at arms, that they made him make a retreat. So they came home to Mr. Nason's house again. The monster, you must know, had his certain seasons to come out in, and to make his attempts upon the children of the people of the town. Also these seasons did these valiant worthies watch him in, and did continually assault him, insomuch that in process of time he became not only wounded but lame. Also he had not made the havoc of the townsmen's children so formerly as he had done. And it is very verily believed by some that this beast will certainly die of his wounds. This therefore made Mr. Greatheart and his fellows of great fame in this town, so that many of the people that wanted their taste of things, yet had a reverend esteem and respect for them. Upon this account therefore it was that these pilgrims got not much hurt there. True, there were some of the baser sort that could see no more than a mole, nor understand more than a beast. These had no reverence for these men, nor took the notice of their valour and adventures. Well, the time grew on that the pilgrims must go on their way, wherefore they prepared for their journey. They sent for their friends, they conferred with them. They had some time set apart therein to commit each other to the protection of their prince. There were again that brought them of such things as they had, that were fit for the weak and the strong, for the women and the men, and so laded them with such things as were necessary. Then they set forwards on their way, and their friends accompanying them so far as was convenient, they again committed each other to the protection of their king, and departed. They therefore that were of the pilgrims' company went on, and Mr. Greatheart went before them. Now the women and children being weakly, they were forced to go as they could bear. By this means Mr. Ready to Halt and Mr. Feeble-mind had more to sympathize with their condition. When they were gone from the townsmen, and when their friends had bid them farewell, they quickly came to the place where Faithful was put to death. Therefore they made a stand and thanked him that had enabled him to bear his cross so well, and the rather because they now found that they had a benefit by such a manly suffering as was his. They went on therefore after this a good way further, talking of Christian and Faithful, and how Hopeful joined himself to Christian, after that Faithful was dead. Now they were come up from the hill Lucre, where the silver mine was, which took Demas off from his pilgrimage, and into which, as some think, Bians fell and perished, wherefore they considered that. But when they were come to the old monument that stood over against the hill Lucre, to wit, to the pillar of salt that stood also within view of Sodom, and its stinking lake, they marvelled, as did Christian before, that men of that knowledge and ripeness of wit as they were, should be so blinded as to turn aside there. Only they considered again that nature is not affected with the harms that others have met with, especially if that thing upon which they look has an attracting virtue upon the foolish eye. I saw now that they went on till they came at the river that was on this side of the Delectable Mountains, to the river where the fine trees trees grow on both sides, and whose leaves, if taken inwardly, are good against surfeites, where the meadows are green all the year long, and where they might lie down safely. By this riverside in the meadow there were cotes and folds for sheep, a house built for the nourishing and bringing up of those lambs, the babes of whose women that go on pilgrimage. Also there was here one that was entrusted with them, who could have compassion, and that could gather these lambs with his arm and carry them in his bosom, and that could gently lead those that were with young. Now to the care of this man Christiana admonished her 4 daughters to commit their little ones, that by these waters they might be housed, harbored, succored, and nourished, and that none of them might be lacking in time to come. This man, if any of them go astray or be lost, he will bring them again. He will also bind up that which was broken, and will strengthen them that are sick. Here they will never want meat and drink and clothing. Here they will be kept from thieves and robbers, for this man will die before one of those committed to his trust shall be lost. Besides, here they shall be sure to have good nurture and admonition, and shall be taught to walk in right paths, and that is a favor of no small account. Also here, as you see, are delicate waters, pleasant meadows, dainty flowers, variety of trees, and such as bear wholesome fruit, not like that Matthew eat of, that fell over the wall, out of Beelzebub's garden, but fruit that procureth health, where there is none, and that continueth and increaseth where it is. We will stop there, friends, because I'm getting tongue-tied. Have a good day. God bless you.